Hello and good morning, and welcome to Signpost webinar. My name is Pat Murphy, Head of Environment Knowledge Transfer with Teagasc. I'm coming to you from the southeast, where the harvest is finally up and running and going full swing, and promise of good weather. So hopefully things are looking good down here. We're coming to you this morning talking about a Hedgerow week, which was launched earlier this week and which will take place all of next week with events around the country. I'm joined this morning by Catherine Keena, biodiversity specialist with Teagasc, and helping us with questions will be Ivan Kelly, also a biodiversity and upland specialist with Teagasc. You're very welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Pat.
Catherine, a big week for you, and I've been leading out on this. This is the sixth time we've had a Hedgerow week going back to 2019.
Absolutely, and it was super to have Ivan and Michal Kelly and Yvonne and yourself. So it was very much a team effort to get the Farmland Biodiversity Day, at which we launched Hedgerow Week. So the two together are the busiest 2 weeks of the year for me.
Very good. Okay, so if you're ready, you might share your presentation.
Okay, so our theme this year was Better Hedges for All, meaning all the services that Hedges provide, and I'll touch on a lot of them as we go through the presentation. And as you mentioned, we launched it during the week, and again I'll explain more about the walks that we're doing. Our main events is repeated throughout the country because it's so important to try and get the message about planting hedges and subsequent management, and it actually totally explains the management of our existing hedges. So we're having a farm walk at 11 o'clock each day, moving around the country, starting in Ballyhaise and going in a sea around the country. Ballyhaise on Monday, Athenry on Tuesday, Clonakilty on Wednesday, Curtains in Moore Park on Thursday, and back in Kildalton on Friday. So on the Teagasc farms in each place. And it's in association with the Heritage Council. So the biodiversity officers will be attending, and our own we'll have contractors, and we'll have different things going on at the sites. But so it's just the morning, come at 11. They won't go on all day. So all are welcome, farmers, non-farmers. I think we want to promote to non-farmers the good work that farmers are doing in this field. And I think the more we know about each other and talk, we've had very good discussions before, you know, from a variety of stakeholders. And as you said, it's our 6th year. And then there's another couple of events next week. We have talking about growing the native trees and hedges from Irish seed with Ray O'Fo Blue and Jeremy Turkington from Home Tree Charity. And I said on next Saturday, actually, there's Irish Seed Savers have a workshop from 10 to 1 in Clare. And for all details and other on any other events, go on to teagasc.ie Hedgerow Week. Okay, so we had a Farmland Biodiversity event featuring all Farmland Biodiversity. It wasn't all about hedges. There was just one of the 11 stands on hedges, but there was huge interest in Catherine Calfer and our own Catherine from Teagasc in Wexford, and Adam Mulvihill from Biodiversity Officer in Longford led that stand there, and there was huge interest and lots of questions, which I think Ivan has caught some of them for later. So again, I have put in red about 5 or 6 different things, and I'm summarised them at the end because, you know, we've still some place to go with hedges, and I blame myself for maybe not getting the message right. So I'm trying to focus on the things that people, you know, are still mixed up on or ask me about. So in my simple head, we have lots of hedge types. I could have a whole stream of different hedges, from small to short to long but from a management point of view, and for hedge cutting, and the hedge cutting week starts now on the 1st of hedge cutting starts on the 1st of September. So from a management point of view, I have found it very helpful to explain by splitting them into 2 basic groups. Ones that are tree line hedges and ones that are topped. And that to me explains an awful lot. And after that, once you know the principles, you go off and do, it's logical. I'm kind of getting away from a set of rules. It's more understanding what we're trying to do for these two hedges. And the tree line hedge, the biodiversity value is primarily in the canopy. So, I would still have farmers come along at events and say that's useless. Now, when they say useless, they may mean stock proof, and it usually is, because it's thin at the base. But then not everybody wants a stock proof hedge. But we're more and more valuing the biodiversity and the carbon point of view, and that hedge, our tree line hedges, are absolutely super for that. And they're kind of irreplaceable. They're probably 200 years old, up to 2,000 years old in their current, mature trees. So they're extremely valuable, and we really need to look after our existing tree line hedges. The topped hedges then, they have that dense space, and then they have the occasional tree, not as many as the tree line, but again it's primarily the dense space then has different biodiversity. So you can see there's all the different species. They all have their own niche. It's amazing. Of all the birds that use hedges, they all have their own little niche. You can see there the buzzard up in the top of the tree, the goldfinch nesting up in the tree itself. Then you have the birds feeding, and the birds, nesting at the different sites, and feeding along the edge and down on the ground with the thrush and the sparrow. So it's a bit like, from a biodiversity point of view, our flora and fauna are attached to very specific habitats. You won't get red grouse in the hedge. But you won't get the hedgerow birds, in the watercourse. So, and similarly in the hedge, then each bird has its own niche, and the value of our topped hedge can be very quickly improved hugely if we just leave that occasional tree grow up and have some of the canopy biodiversity that the tree line hedge has. And of course, I'll just say at this stage, both are good, and my mission in life is that to have both in the countryside. And if on any farm, it's our recommendation to have, definitely to have at least 50% of them as tree line hedges. And so that's where we're going for. And clearly this is not what we want. And no flowers or bees for fruit, no fruit for birds, no carbon, very low carbon, very low volume there, very low on everything really. So as I said, there's a few things that can be done there, can be let grow up, but instantly, if there was, even for this year, if that farmer left one of the white, I'm not talking about planting, I'm talking about let one grow up, we would have in 5 years, we'd have a huge, both visual and difference. So that's one of my real clear messages. So then to differentiate between the two, because this is a problem, and the tree line hedge doesn't necessarily have to be ash trees, and I was trying to show this. Now I don't think it quite, I'll have to go back again and take that photo in summer, because you can see you can see it's a bit gappy at the bottom, but there's still a lot of greenery there. But in the winter, it's so much clearer to see. And I think that's my message out of that one, is that we only assess hedge structure in winter. That hedge there, between the vegetation growing up, the ground vegetation, the cow parsley and all those lovely hedge plants at the bottom, they go up to 1 meter, 2 meters. And then the drooping branches, it looks as if it's a barrier, a full, what am I saying? Completely covered. But in the winter, that will look totally different. And that's fine. That's fine for the tree line hedge. But clearly that to me is a tree line hedge, whereas everything looks good in the summer. And the worry is that would be chopped down, thinking it's a lovely dense space, when it doesn't. Similarly with that one, you're getting the picture. So the tree line hedges in the summer, they look to have a full dense base, but in the winter, it's very clear that they haven't, and that's fine, but it determines what you do with them. That's my point. Similarly here, so they're all our tree line hedges, totally different. So it's very, very wrong to talk about the management of that in the same sentence as we talk about our top. There's another tree line hedge. Again, where you have sheep, you can see the base even clearer, but the picture tells us what most of our tree line hedges look like, and they're beautiful. So please don't get me wrong. I love the tree line. I love them so much. You know, it's sad when you see some of these chopped down. And I think maybe in the past I haven't talked as much about them is because I don't want people to do anything to them. So, but we need to do more of that, and you'll see that when we come to what we're doing on our farms. So once you decide which one you have. So the next one then is just to understand the most important thing. If you understand that whitethorn wants to grow into a tree, management will become obvious. Hedges, what we maybe some people would only say our hedges is our managed hedges. They're a man-made habitat. They're not natural. They wouldn't be there if they weren't managed, because the whitethorn and the other hedge species and the tree species, their whole mission in life is to grow into being a single stem, full canopy, tree. So that's fine. So in the tree line hedge, we acknowledge that, we leave as is, and that's brilliant. But if we want a topped hedge, it's different. So just to go back to the tree line hedges, now I'm not saying we don't cut them. We have to distinguish between what the farmer or person needs as opposed to what the hedge needs. Tree line hedges do not need to be cut. That's the point. And a lot of them, out the land may not be. If there's overhanging branches, and if Francis Quigley is listening, he'll be telling me about the machinery passing by. Absolutely no problem. If you need to cut the branches. If you don't, you don't need to cut a tree, the side branches on a tree for the tree's sake. But if you do, if it's on the road, obviously you will. If it's on a farm roadway, which oftentimes they are, if you have machinery in without a grass margin, if they are up to the base of the hedge, obviously they'll be interfering with machines. So you will need to side trim them. The main thing is never to top them. But as I said, ideally in the ideal world, and the farmer that's set up and has gone for the lovely grass margins is getting paid huge money for them. A grass margin alongside that, provided that's cut, the base of it is cut, and we have examples of this on the Teagasc farms, that then you won't even need to cut the hedge, because the first thing we'd have always said is, of course, we don't want the hedge encroaching into the field. But the branches don't start growing. It's the ground cover. So it's the blackthorn that creeps out into the grass margin is what we need to cut. So I can foresee in the future our tree line hedges not needing to be cut, a grass margin alongside, which absolutely must be cut every year or so. Otherwise, the hedge will keep growing out, which is fine if that's what you want, but we want our grass margin as well. But the main then in red, the main message is, do not turn the tree line hedges into stumpy upside down tallage brush hedges. So again, all the sad stories. And again, I can guarantee you, if you looked at these today, they would look okay, because the ground vegetation would be up around them and they would have fluffed out and there'd be leaves there joining up the stumps. So you cannot judge these today. Now, these are possibly extreme, but this is what we don't want. I mean, Lillian O'Sullivan is doing great work measuring the carbon. I think it's obvious they won't hold much carbon, and they're, not much good for biodiversity, and they're on their way out. I suppose that's the other sad part about it. Now, it's very, very hard to get pictures of hedges, but I'm not sure how that's coming across there because of the background. It's hard to get the photo, but the top one is there. The middle one there is where that hedge has been cut as stumps, like the previous ones. In the bottom one, it has been cut, but is growing again, which is fine. Again, there's no rules here. If you are going to let it grow, and are happy with that shape, well, maybe not happy, but it is better than cutting it to the same point every time. The other way would be to bring it back to the base by coppicing it, but you would only do that in a small bit every year. But the main thing is to let it grow up. This is probably I was trying to show it in the last picture there. While there's trees in that, the hedge, this is a cut away from the back picture. So if you look to the little cutout in the corner here, again, It doesn't look bad. That'll look super today. But if you can see what's happening here, the stump, and you can see where the minute you cut it at that level, the growth proliferates there. It pulls any bit of growth that ever was going to grow up to that point. And if that keeps getting hammered, now that may be let up and up and up every year, which would be good, but it's possible, very likely that would be cut at the same level. And then there's very little to support that hedge. So it's under danger itself. There's another example there, what I'm saying. Again, a better example, but still not good. Because we want the growth at the base if we're topping it. This is the end story here, where there was a hedge there, and my guess is that it was cut and cut and cut, and now there's an earth bank. And again, you may ask, why do I think there was a hedge there? Even without looking at the map, and you'll see the bluebells and the flora that are associated with woodland and with hedgerows are there. So there was a hedge there, I have no doubt. And it's either, been just mowed down so much that it death by 1,000 cuts, let's say. Now, just while I'm on that, because again, some people would say then that's no use and we must plant a hedge. The bank itself is valuable. Now, moving away from hedges, and I talked a good bit about this before, that from a biodiversity point of view, it doesn't always have to be a hedge. There are good, from a biodiversity point of view, habitat margins and banks are super. You can see there, okay, they don't have the hedge flora and fauna, but they'll have different flora and fauna that will grow there. And just one comment on that, we're not talking about it today, but this is a very, very good example that we found with the two sides of a bank. So on the right hand side was where the bluebells and the stitchwort there is surviving, and on the left hand side it's where sprays and nutrients have got in. It's not a happy story from the bank point of view. So if you have a grass bank, it's an earth bank, it's still valuable. It doesn't always have to have a hedge on it, but it certainly doesn't need a fertilizer or sprays getting in at it. And then the flora can be useful, is very likely to be useful, because it's very likely that the flora there are going back the years. So go back to my main point in red, only healthy hedges with dense, healthy growth at the base should be topped. And that's a long-term issue, but I suppose from today we're really trying to get to our new hedges. It is still a problem for new hedges, so that's where we're trying to get to. So for a proper topped hedge, we've shown all the bad ones. We do need to keep cutting it. Apical dominance, it constantly wants to turn into a tree. So we've picked out our blackthorn there and our whitethorn that we want to turn to allow them go into trees. The rest of it we want to maintain as a topped hedge with the dense base. So it is managed, must be topped. So this is the difference. The hedge needs to be cut to keep it as a hedge, and avoid rough cuts. So hence I worry about leaving them for a while and then coming in cutting them, and rough cuts are not good from the health of a hedge. So providing your flowers in the hedge and also having tree line hedges on the farm, you will have the best of both worlds. So just examples there of good topped hedges. A topped hedge which had been topped for the last 50 years, and only 2 or 3 or 4 years ago a slip was left grow up, and you can see it takes a few years for the flowers and the fruit because they grow on the older wood, but that hedge has been transformed in a very short space. So similarly there. So on our Teagasc farms, our existing topped hedges, we're letting an occasional thorn grow up. Not all the one year. I like to do one and then maybe another one next year and another one, because they'll be at different stages. And there was Catherine again. It's a really simple message, but we need to show it. And that picture tells 1,000 words. So new sapling has been retained then and comes good. And just as well as the flowers, I don't know if you can see again, I've just inset a crop of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture you can see there with the bird flying off in the distance. But has anybody good eyesight to see what else is in the smaller picture? The smaller birds, I think they're chaffinches. I stand to be corrected. I see 3 of them there using that as a perching post. They would not be sitting on the top of the topped hedge. So there's a very quick thing we can do with our topped hedges. occasional now, one in every field side this year. I'd be very happy, get people going on it. And Ivan, you'll remember this photo. We were driving through Cavan and we got all excited, or I got all excited, and Ivan stopped the car and I took a photo that it's not only happening on Teagasc farms, people are getting the message. So that was just on the side of the road. For the first time, somebody has left some whitethorn saplings grow up. So just to summarise for the new top hedge, native Irish species, mainly whitethorn, plants of Irish provenance grown from Irish seed, 5 per metre in a double staggered row, the occasional whitethorn selected to grow into a flowering tree and protected with a tree guard, pruned close to the ground immediately after planting to produce multiple shoots, strip of compostable film pushed over the cut stumps. The compostable film is secured by pressing the edges into the ground, protected from livestock by fencing. The leaders are cut back each year to encourage multiple shoots to develop layers of growth. And my colleague Michal Kelly has a lovely way of saying it, that if you wean the strong calf, the other calves will do better. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're cutting the leaders to let the others thrive and flourish. Regular light cutting, avoiding rough cuts to manage the apical dominance and maintain a dense space with an eventual height of at least 1.8 after cutting above any bank if present. There's a lot there. I'm going to show the pictures now and I can fly through them. I'm not sure how my time is going, Pat. I can't see my phone. If you need to tell me. So the principle is.
We're at just gone 10 to 10.
Okay, super. Thanks, Pat. So the principle to remember is wherever you cut whitethorn, it will sprout immediately below the cut. And that's this. If you understand that, you'll never have to ask again, where do I cut? Because you'll know wherever you want it to multiply. And that's why whitethorn is such a super hedge plant and has been the backbone of all hedges, because it thrives on being cut correctly. It makes a great hedge, it makes a great tree. It just does both, whichever you want it to do. So that's there. So, and then we would only prune it if we put down the compostable film. You can see there on the top where it's cut, it has got 5, and then we cut it next year. And as I said, we may not cut them all, cut the leaders, and the rest will thrive, and the leaders then may sprout again. And this is what you get. 2 compostable film suppliers in Ireland, Samco in Adair and in Limerick, and Maze Tech in Wexford. The cost is roughly 55 to 75 cents per metre. The variation is really important that people think about this. You think what you want. The width, the wider is better, because the more you cover, the less plants you'll have to walk down. But obviously you pay for what you get, so it's going to be more expensive. The length of the roll, the shorter rolls are lighter and easier to handle, but again, they're more expensive. So it depends what you go for. That's where the variation. It's not about between the two people, and they will do anything. Now, maybe not instantly, but they have said they will make whatever people want. They have tended to go for, or people maybe think we'll get the cheapest, we'll get the narrow one, but just be careful, you know, the wider the better, and the smaller roll is just for ease of handling. That depends on how strong you are, maybe. I like the lighter ones. Okay, and then just to summarize, the tree line hedge, more or less the same when you're planting it. And again, we have, I think, 2,500 farmers planting hedges in acres. And some of the acres one are coming into this winter as well. So we have, I think, 400 or 500 acres too, plus the balance of whoever didn't get to plant in acres one. So we have a huge amount of planting to do. So again, you decide which one you're going to do. If you're going for the tree line hedge, it's the same native Irish species, same plants of Irish provenance grown from Irish seed, 5 per metre in a double staggered row, and they're all allowed grow into trees. Now, the acres has the same species there. If outside acres, there would be nothing wrong with putting some of your tree species into this hedge, but I think very sensibly, acres has the same spec for both, and that's fine. It's a beautiful hedge. It still gives you a chance if you can get them. The problem is to get the Irish provenance for any of the other lovely species is very difficult. protected from livestock by fencing, which is more important here for long term. I would hope that the topped hedges where we've done and put a single strand of electric wire will become, and has come down from the hedge in Kildalton after a number of 5 years or whatever. So the tree line hedge then is super, providing it's never topped and it's side trimmed if you need to. The hedge doesn't need it, but if you need to do it, it is absolutely no harm. And the main thing is not to fall between the two stools. You must do one or the other if you want a good hedge. So to demonstrate this, the words are one thing, but what we did then is we set up demonstration sites on 8 Teagasc farms, and in each you're going back with 3 years of them now, and we do the new and the topped ones. I started with the topped, and then one of the advisors said, you can't keep talking about liking the tree line, you have to show them to us. So we caught up then with the tree line ones. So we have 10 meters of each type planted each year. So rather than walking around farms, we now walk 30 meters each way, and you see everything. So I'll fly through the pictures. There is some little differences in each of them, and I'll just point them out. That was just one, the first one in Johnstown Castle there. So you can see, very hard to get pictures of the tree line hedge. Just doesn't show up there, but you can see it. And I suppose the point from here is this year, because of the weather, in that particular year, we didn't dig. It was too hard to get a digger in. It would have messed up the field. If it's that wet, it's easy to plant. It is easy to plant. Now, maybe if you're doing 500 meters, but it is actually easy. In fact, with sticky ground, it's probably easier not to have dug it. The main reason that we dig is to make the job easier. I'm very, very clear on that. And we do both. So this is in Ballyhaise. So again, starting off here, this one now has 3 summers growth, the first 10 meters, and then followed on by 2 years, followed on by 1 year, and on the other side of the fence there. And that's what it looks like in winter. That was a year. No, that was only this February, but still, it's mighty. The growth is all down where we want it to be, and you can see clearly that the tree guards on the tree. Otherwise, they get forgotten. Must put that. It's an absolute shame to cut it off. I mean, we are talking about allowing the slip grow up in the existing hedges. It will be crooked. It may fall over. It's better than nothing, but it's much better in a new hedge to keep one going from the beginning. So again, that's in Ballyhaise. Now here we dug for ease of planting. It was in rougher ground. Well, no, we always dig to make the job easier, because anything that makes life easier for the farmer with a digger or a mini digger. So we've done both, but it's for the ease of the job rather than the actual planting. Again, here was in Grange. It was very, very wet, so we didn't. So again, you can see there the topped hedge and the tree line hedge there in on the left. We didn't dig that one. And again, they're both doing fine. In Athenry, that one in front, not the big one, that didn't grow that quick now, but the one in front there that's fenced in, we have a fantastic demo there. And we've grass margins this side, which we won't talk about today. In Kildalton, we have it here. I do say to the staff in the colleges, I don't want it manicured, because I want this to be reality. So my message to them now is, I see a thistle there. I am very happy to spot spray noxious weeds, as we should do, and farmers are happy to hear that. So thistles or docks, because they can take over and they are under the law. We must control them, not necessarily get rid of them, control them. So they can be. And after that, the only management I have asked the staff, the college managers to do is walk down the vegetation. And I think we'll probably pull it back to June. We said July this year. In those ones, because it's amazing how they flop over. And again, the width of the film really makes a difference there, as to how much walking of the vegetation. If you cut it, it'll only grow again. So it's a case of walking it down. If spraying it is not good. Again, our tree line hedge there, planted straight into the ground. In Curtains in Moore Park, yeah, there's a great mighty hedge there. And just another example here, the big question I get is it too late? I planted a hedge 5, 3, 10, 100 years ago. Can I do it? If you do it 100 years ago, we're talking about coppicing. Well, we're still talking about coppicing here. I worry about doing it without putting down the film. This was about 5 years old and had been nothing had been done, and they still wanted a topped hedge. So it had been topped then when it came to the wire, which is what we don't want. So we're retrieving it, and it should be super. I mean, this is a lot more than now a 2-year-old Beirut whip. This hedge should fly. But it's a harder job doing it if you don't do it day one. That's all I'd say. If you see that material there, another variation there in Oak Park, because it's tillage and because they have a plough, they use the plough. So that's just another to make the job easier instead of getting a digger. And in Clonakilty, that one again, I think that one wasn't dug. That one was dug. Sorry, Clonakilty, always we do, because it's kind of on a site which is rocky, and we had trouble the year we didn't have the digger. We knew it. So and there's our tree line hedge. So we always try and keep them somewhere near. Again, we're trying to show this demo. I think a picture tells 1,000 words. It's not easy to get the right picture. I spent weekends this year trying to get these 2 pictures, and now we're making great use of them, hauling this big board around the country. But we've had them at Bloom. I think it says it does give the message, doesn't it, about the tree line and the chopped, and then we show them in between time. All together there at Tullamore Show, we have the 2 types of hedges and the real things. They're in pots there, but it's a very good working demonstration. We had a variation of that then on site, but this is when we can't go to the sites. And again, another, like my roadside one, a success. This is a normal farmer in acres and has actually done the job, because not you're only seeing the 10 meters there what I'm doing, but this is a real life where he did the whole lot. So super job. Again, just teeing up for next week, maybe. Native species are best for biodiversity. Our cycle of life, they're all dependent on each other and dependent on timing of flowering. The other thing when we talk about species is think of all species. We have to avoid a single species focus at the expense of others. And to explain that, we're talking about a lot about flowers for the bees, and that's absolutely super. And just not to forget the other whole suite of invertebrates and mammals that use the hedges. Just but a couple of facts: 65% of our butterfly species breed on hedgerows. Whitethorn supports 62 species of the larger Irish moths. So they obviously have to be in tune with what the whitethorn is doing. So again, a couple of other examples: the holly blue butterfly breeds on the holly, the brimstone caterpillar on the alder buckthorn, and the brown hairstreak butterfly feeds on the blackthorn leaves in spring after hatching from eggs which have been overwintered on the plant. So we need to take the whole, it's not just the flowers. You have caterpillars, you have all sorts of things there. And on the bots, you have the yellow-barred brindle moth feeds on holly, and the figure-of-8 moth feeds on whitethorn. And again, these are just what we know, what I have learned from Jasmine Harding and the pollinator plan, and the people who know, the experts in each field. And I'm trying to bring that message out to make it, we don't need to know about all 62 moths, but we do need to know the principle of it. So the native is better of Irish provenance then, is because the Irish ones, our Irish provenance means plants grown from seed collected from Irish plants growing in Ireland for the past 10,000 years. The origin of the plants or seeds determines their adaptability, quality, and wildlife value. So my example is the trees of the same species adapted to different regions of Europe will bud, burst, flower, and seed at different times, and can fool our associated invertebrates. Irish birds, mammals, and insects have co-adapted with local Irish tree and hedge species of Irish provenance. So we are going to talk about that next week, about how we need to build that up. Just one very important one for farmers, in the where a hedgerow is removed, and the rules have changed that now you must plant twice the length of a hedge. And this is there's 2 things: there's the EIA and there's the landscape features in for their your BIS payment. But the BIS was always removed the same amount, so it's now acknowledging that older hedges are more valuable. So now you have to plant twice the length before, and hedges planted under acres do not count for that. Just maybe I should say there, under the EIA, if you are removing more than 500 meters or the limit that you're going to hit quicker is creating a 5-hectare field, you need to get permission, okay, as well as the land, the base one. So again, just in summary, our hedges are important for all the different things, for the biodiversity, for the water, for the shelter, for the landscape, for carbon, for food, and we want better hedges for all of these ecosystem services. So that, just to summarize my key points that I had in red as I went through, differentiate always into which hedge you're talking about, which type of hedge. Only assess hedge structure in winter. Tree line hedges do not need to be cut. They can be side trimmed, but they do not need to be cut. Only hedges with dense, healthy growth at the base should be topped. Decide which type before planting a new hedge. New hedge plants of Irish provenance is best for biodiversity. Have at least 50% tree line hedges on your farm. Retain occasional thorn trees within existing top hedges. An easy win over the next few years if we all did it this autumn. Avoid rough cuts and have field margins alongside hedges. And then we will have better hedges for all. Garmagi.
Thank you very much, Catherine. You could stop sharing there now.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very comprehensive. I suppose a lot to be learned and a huge merit in doing the job right from the start. I think that's one of the key messages, is that if you get it right at the beginning, you've I suppose two small Latin Hebrews is absolutely the key message here. Couple of quick questions, and then there's questions flying in on the Q&A, and just remind people if they have a question to put it into the Q&A. You mentioned whitethorn as the predominant species. The other species that you might think about including in your hedgerow, what are they? Okay, well, the thorn species would be the blackthorn and the holly. So their holly is still growing, but is super as a hedging stock roof. The others then I would include occasionally, because they're not as good for structure, but they're absolutely super. So they would be the Guelder rose, the spindle, the hazel, the woodbine, honeysuckle, the dog rose. Now the problem is getting those, when I mentioned the dog rose, not to get the invasive alien rose that is commonly sold, whatever about gardens. It's impossible to get some of them, the native species, and definitely the Irish provenance. Please, if anybody is listening, please promote if you have these species, because that's the biggest problem. Every year when I go to the sites, I've always managed to get 1 or 2 species. I've never got them all because of availability of the minor species, as we call them. So we need nurseries to produce the minor species as well as the whitethorn for both farmers and non-farmers. We can't depend on schemes for doing everything, but I think people aren't aware of that issue. But following on from the point you make, there's probably a need there for a bit of planning and a bit of work with the nurseries to make sure that they don't get a deluge of demand for 2 years in 7 when the scheme is starting, and then nothing for or very little for another number of years. There needs to be a bit of concerted planning to make sure that you're going to have availability. Absolutely, Pat, but you and I know how schemes work and how the RDP works and how it is front loaded so that farmers get their money. So I think we could say that forever. I'm trying to say apart from schemes, there's a huge amount of planting going to happen. Everybody is positive about trees, and I'm talking about non-scheme farmers. I'm talking about non-farmers, communities. I think, and a lot of these people who are doing it in the name want to do good for biodiversity and schemes. There'll be a demand, but we need to increase that demand for the Irish provenance. We can't depend always on schemes, is what I'm saying. We need to build the industry
and aside for schemes, because it'll take a number of years. But I guarantee you, and I'm sure you'll agree, that in 5 years' time we will be still planting these, won't we? For climate, for for biodiversity, for water. So if we could have an industry in 5 years, that would supply that ongoing need, I think that would be the way to start.
Okay, just one thing in terms of the timing of planting. So people are starting to think about it now. What is your advice in terms of best time to plant?
Well, certainly order now, because this is the only time you get your Irish provenance. So get onto your suppliers and make sure you get the plant passport if you want the Irish provenance. As regards planting, over the years, I have always, and it may not suit farmers now, but if it suits, I would go into February, into March, providing you don't miss the boat. And the reason for that is, if you have the plant sitting in the ground all the winter, that's the time I get the calls about the hares. It's sitting there for a few months. If you can get it in good conditions, do the job right, keep the roots dry, or not let them dry out. In at the end of February, you can see there. I kind of got caught last year in Kildalton, having gone around the country and came back, and it didn't. It was the only time it ever struggled on me. But I was into May and using them from the cold store, and then it came dry afterwards. So I pulled back into February this year. Normally I'd go March, but do you get my point, that if you can have them in March, providing the spring doesn't come too early, you want the roots to grow down before the leaves start growing. So then you have only 6 weeks and the thing is away. So you can mind it better from now. The topped hedge, if the hares and rabbits eat a bit, it's no problem as long as they don't get on top of it. And that's why we have our tree guard for the tree. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's getting that balance right between having it in the ground too long and being susceptible to predation and getting the
And
right
not missing the
start then
boat
in the
and
spring.
the farm workload in spring. I'm
Yeah.
very conscious when I mention that. Some farmers say, "Oh, why are you and I appreciate that. So yeah.
Okay, Ivan, loads of questions coming
Yeah,
in there.
lots of questions. So I'll try and group some of them together, Catherine, just so we can get
Good
through as
man.
many as we can.
Yeah.
But there was a comment that there's none of your events north of Cavan, so I suppose it's possibly a good thing that they're looking for more. But how did you pick the sites that you're working in, and maybe explain what you've done
Yeah, I
there
suppose
over the years?
only because we're starting with the Teagasc farms. So that's where our Teagasc farms are. I would love and to move out to encourage signpost farmers, other farmers to do the same, or there's an interest in farmers who have visitors and who are into education, or who have, so let us know if anybody else is willing to do it, I suppose, is what we're saying.
You're open to new ideas for
Open
next
to
year.
business.
Very good. There's a number of questions come in on the whole area. You touched on it briefly on coppicing and laying. And there's a few separate questions, but just maybe what are the basics of both, and when would it be a suitable maintenance of a hedgerow?
Yeah, I love them done right, Ivan. My fear and terror is that they're often not done right. And especially when there's a large amount to be done in a scheme, and it's an absolute, laying is an absolute skill. I mean, we are doing it where we can, where we have it in Kildalton here. Any farm that has it, it's lovely to show it. I'd love to encourage more people in it. So anyway, the principle is exactly the same as what I've been saying. You go back to the base. You go back to the base and cut at the base. With coppicing, you cut right through, as we did there in Clonakilty, I think, or no, Moore Park. And in laying, you cut 3/4 of the way through and bend it over, which is an even more skilled job. But the main principle is, you can see there, always go back to the base if you're doing it. And did you say when to do it? Oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
maybe as in those stumpy hedges, I think will always have to be coppiced, because they wouldn't be long enough for laying. Laying, I think the people, the hedge layers, the experts would talk about kind of 12, 15 years would be ideal. So that's another option for the tree line hedge. If you had a plan, but I think it's all, you can either leave it as a tree line hedge, or maybe in 10, 12 years time to lay it.
Okay, so that laying, a very skilled profession, needs to be done correctly. Coppicing, a little bit more straightforward, but the
Yeah.
key thing is get down really low to the ground.
Correct.
Doing
Correct.
it, because if you come in too high, you're going to end up with the same problem in a few years. There was a question there on the tree guards. You mentioned tree guards in the presentation. Where do you source them, or any advice on suitable tree guards?
No, I understand the ones I use aren't organ or compostable, or the ones that they're normal, the normal, I presume, plastic ones. If forestry companies is usually where I get them in on a batch. I'm sure garden centres do, but they'd be, you know, if you're doing individual, if you're only doing like a few in a hedge. Yeah, so forestry companies would be, if you look
Okay.
online, they would be there to buy like a 25 or 100 of them, you know.
Okay.
And actually, just for acres, there's a spiral one, and there's that one that you saw in the picture there. I think I might, so either one.
Okay. A question here. The viewer has, we've an escaped hedge with ash in it, and it needs to be removed. We need to remove the ash as it's diseased along a roadside. Will the ash regrow if we cut it? And how do we deal with this? Kind of a...
Yeah, and I'm glad you said the roadside, because it was my first question. I've a lot of people saying I have to remove all the ash, and I mean I understand there's no benefit from the disease point of view in removing it, so just be careful that we don't take out dead wood. Is good, dead standing wood is really good. So unless the foresters or somebody has a better reason for removing it, and road safety is obviously a reason, Ivan, you mentioned that. My first question is, do you need to remove it? Just let it die naturally and let others take the natural vegetation take its place. But what was your other question? Yeah, I'm not how.
Yeah, just will the ash regrow? Well, sure,
I
it's
don't. I
diseased.
presume we
Might
don't
not.
know. I'd say, Ivan, and maybe our forestry colleagues know more. And they will be at the our Hedgerow week events. Both talking about planting trees, the tree area scheme, and that topic, because I know they're more engaged with that ash dieback.
Yeah. Someone here has planted 700 meters of a tree-lined hedge in April along in an arable field. It has been smothered by thistles. So I know you mentioned the tree-lined hedge and how you know what maintenance is required.
Yeah.
Maybe you said it's less, but they have tried manual weeding that come back twice as strong. So any advice here will say when you to try and control the weeds.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're going for your topped hedge, you'd have maybe possibly your compostable film down, but I suppose for the tree line.
Tree line hedge, I mean, you there's not a lot you can do. I love walking down thistles compared to walking down grass. They can be, and I suppose again, if there was a margin in there, and if there was a margin cut that wouldn't allow stuff flop in. I know in Kildare there, just where I had the hedge too, there was a lot of stuff flopped in, where it's now been turned into a margin, and it will be much easier. No, I think that's the reason why, I suppose, originally the tree line hedges, you just let them survive. They'll be a bit slower growing, but I don't mind at all as long as it's alive. So there is no obvious answer there. Yeah.
An existing hedge, it is willow or Sally as they call them in Mayo. They are growing for years. Should I top them?
I'd like to see the structure in winter. I mean, it's like to me, it's like it'll behave like the ash tree. It'll throw up shoots if you cut it at the. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, and I think that this was covered there before, but you mentioned the difficulty of sourcing seeds, plants of Irish provenance. Are Irish nurseries growing their capacity to provide enough seeds, plants, so that all acres persistent can plant hedges now? I know. So I suppose the key there, as was mentioned, is to plan. I know, but is to plan ahead, start thinking in the future and what we need to do.
And to encourage, and I suppose this is where next week our talk is about a nursery which is doing just that. And the department have good schemes now to support nurseries. You know, to grow, you know, and supporting nurseries, capital grants and different. So there is a move towards helping existing nurseries and new nurseries set up and develop this kind of, to me, maybe a niche product that would be a higher value product, and hopefully we'd all value it and use it. Yeah.
Catherine, there's a question there in terms of, is there any data on the below ground biodiversity in hedgerows? And I suppose you could add to that the below ground carbon.
Yeah, well, Lillian certainly looked at the carbon, didn't she? In the hedges, but the beneath ground, she was definitely what was being collected. The below ground biodiversity. Now, we had fantastic experts on biodiversity yesterday at our farmland biodiversity. Now, they weren't talking about under hedges, but Aaron Fox and Carl Melody and Carl Summers were there, so they must get them to start looking under the hedge. But my first reaction is not unless they can say better, is we probably don't know. And when you talk about fungi under trees, there's a lot of work done about different fungi associated with different trees. I expect it's extremely valuable and stuff that won't be under the grassland, but we need to know more. I suppose at the moment we just don't disturb it as much as possible, and yeah.
Yeah, there was a similar question on the whole area of, using the picking species, the reservoir species for both predator species, and removing some plants that support pest species. I suppose more on the research side. Have you any information on that, Catherine?
On the hedge now rather than the grass margin, is it?
Well, yeah, on the hedge that would,
Yeah.
that would reservoir species for the predator species that will say, will possibly come in on your songbirds and so on, and the suitability of the different species. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the only thing that comes to mind there is that, in for our breeding waders, we have a new breeding waders EIP, and for breeding waders, we do not want hedges at all. So much and all as I love them, in Northern Ireland, they're actually taking them out in the Curlew, the Life project, taking out hedges where they were never meant to be. So I think so predators, you don't want trees, isn't that right? You don't want hedges, but particularly you don't want trees where there's ground nesting birds. I don't know if that answers the question. I wouldn't think it's the species. And I suppose for normal, if you're talking about predating on songbirds, this has been always said over the years about the bigger birds. If the habitat is right, that's a natural cycle, and the birds, if the hedge is right, and this is where we need that dense space for the hedges for the birds, the songbirds, that's where they will hide from their own natural predators, and that's a natural cycle. So I wouldn't be doing anything separate there to get rid of the predators. I'd be making hidey places for the songbirds, and that will look after itself.
There's an interesting comment here, I think a good one, that the benefits of hedgerows to the landowner needs to be promoted more to encourage more planting. So I suppose we've touched on the biodiversity and on possibly water quality or the carbon side, but the benefits to the landowner around incentivizing social benefits, increased shelter, mentioned here, land mortality, greater water infiltration, reduced overland
that
flow,
was the
and
one
so
now.
on.
Somebody took me on about we really should be pushing the flood control. Now that's obviously relevant to some and not to others, but and we know there was the agricultural catchments. There was a study done by somebody associated with it that showed that the hedge landscape is better for water quality than a non-hedge landscape. So you're right, Ivan, and I think it's it's what I say about general biodiversity. There's the money and there's the law and there's the schemes, and then we really need to. Farmers are the ones that we're probably a bit more shy about talking about the nice to be and the moral and the social and the leaving a farm in a nicer condition or as good a condition. So I take that on board. That we should.
Just two here. Maybe I'll can go back to Pat then. But the importance of earthen banks in the whole conversation, their biodiversity value and so on, and maybe where farmers are looking where to put in a new hedgerow on a farm, they already have some earthen banks. What was the message there, Catherine?
Yeah, well, I showed that one, and I'd say that one was where the hedge was, and if the farmer wants to put it back there, that's fine. But they are valuable in their own right, as I say. The most important thing is not to do what you might be inclined to do, is turn it upside down with a digger and then put the hedge in. That would destroy the carbon, destroy the biodiversity. And don't forget that hedge bank has probably been there 200 plus years and hasn't been disturbed. It's the only bit of land on the soil, on the farm maybe, that hasn't been, ploughed, reseeded, fertilized. So leave the bank alone. I've no problem if it suits to put a hedge there, but from a biodiverse boundary point of view, and acres maybe doesn't quite take this into account, that the one I showed there that has no hedge, the barn owl will still fly along that, and the butterflies will, and the bees will, because it is biodiverse. It just isn't a hedge. So as you know, the grass margins, and in particular the banks, I would put as equal to the hedges.
Perfect. And look at a good few questions have come in there on the whole issue of Irish provenance, whitethorn, and its availability for planting, we'll say for the deadline next year on acres, or anyone that wants to plant. I suppose a few questions: Are the nurseries going to have enough Irish Providence plants available? Are they going to be importing plants? And what is their advice there regarding ordering and so on?
Yeah, order now, I would say they possibly won't have enough. We don't know how much was planted last year, if you know what I mean, because the people carried over. So order now, look now, and again, ask for the provenance of the species of your minor species as well. Make sure you get the plant passports. It's an issue. Look, as I said, I've been at this for 20 years with trying to get Irish provenance. We can't do everything all at once. Let's get it right 5 years' time is what my message is there. But for me, I wouldn't on our farms. We have never planted anything on the Teagasc. What I've done, I wouldn't plant anything other than Irish provenance. That's a decision for the farmer. But if they order now, they should get it.
Okay.
Question there, they're talking about looking to the next CAP and where carbon farming is likely to come on stream, and a question about the potential contribution of hedgerows to that. But I suppose it's very consistent with the advice you're giving. If you're either, it needs to be, it's kind of size and density, a combination of the two that's going to determine the amount of carbon stored. So if you have a decent size of a topped hedgerow, it will store a reasonable amount of carbon, and even preferably if it's tree lined, it'll store even more. Is that a fair?
I think so. I think my question about the tree line, and I don't know, has it been answered? It certainly stores huge amounts, but no more than a woodland, it'll stop sequestering, won't it, eventually? So I'm not sure. We need to do the figures on a good topped hedge. Unfortunately, a lot of our topped hedges, they look grand today, but look at them in December, and a lot of them are emitting carbon. So I would worry, and we don't know, Pat, will the figures come down to, if ever, come to an individual farm, or will it be a national level? But there is a concern that they are emitting.
I suppose the other thing is the credit is going to be given for additional carbon storage, not for maintaining. Yes. So if they're not getting bigger and bigger all the time, there probably won't be too much credit for it. Okay, Catherine, believe it or not, the hour is up. You might just mention again, if you want, the events that are happening around the country, where they are and when.
So Teagasc Farms, 11 o'clock, Ballyhaise on Monday, Athenry on Tuesday, Clonakilty Wednesday, Curtains in Moore Park on Thursday, and Kildalton on Friday. The webinar next Friday morning about the nurseries and the topic we've been talking about there. And there's an event with Irish Seed Savers in Clare on Saturday. And there may be others on the website that I haven't caught up with. So thank you.
And I haven't been at a number of those events last year. I couldn't recommend them enough. If you have any desire to get to know how to manage and the importance of effective management, particularly in those first few years, they're really well worthwhile spending the couple of hours with Catherine and her crew next week. So without that, I think we've introduced next week's topics, which are going to be Faye O'Foglu and Jeremy Turkington from the Home Tree Charity, talking about growing native trees, hedges, and hedge planting from Irish seed. So without further ado, I'll thank Catherine once again for, as ever, an excellent presentation. Ivan, thanks for helping out with the questions. And as always, Yvonne in the background making this whole thing work. So thanks very much. See you again next week. Enjoy the good weather that's finally arrived. So slán.